Hello, students. Let's go over some background and some vocabulary so that this week will make more sense. So, the big goals of this week, remember, are you can describe how big events and great men changed the course of history. So, these are things like, again, the French alliance with Franklin and John Adams, the events at Valley Forge with George Washington, Thomas Jefferson in writing the Declaration of Independence, even Thomas Paine and Common Sense. Big events. We talk about those a lot. But in this module, especially, we're going to talk about small events and regular people as well, and how those small things can contribute to a change in history as well. So, your vocabulary terms, you have salon, which is a French term, not like the hair place. And then a civil war, not the Civil War, just what a civil war is. So then you have relief, winter quarters, inoculation, muster, and treaty as well. So you should look at the slides to get the definitions for those, write them in your own words again, and then put in a picture or an example or use it in a sentence, some way that you're using the word so that it will stick in your brain better. Because if you learn the word but then you never use it, then you will forget it. And so do something so that it will stay with you. Okay. So then on this note sheet, I want you to review some major battles and events of the first half of the Revolutionary War. So that could be things that happened in 1775, like Bunker Hill. Could be things that happened in 1776, like the Declaration of Independence and the Battle of Trenton. Could be things that happened in 1777, like Saratoga, which was a big deal for Franklin, right? He took Saratoga, he heard about it, and he was like, the French should know about this. And he was like, look at this amazing thing we did. And that is how we got the French on our side. But even after the French had decided to join us, it took a while to get everything together. And so French troops are not actually going to show up until spring of 1778. So I wanted to talk a little bit about timing for this. So if you were 5 years old in 1775 when Lexington and Concord but the Battle of Bunker Hill happened, then you would be 13 years old by the time the Revolutionary War is over and the peace treaty is signed. So sometimes in our lives, there are these super intense years, or maybe 3 years that are crazy. So like 1775, 1776, 1777, bonkers, crazy, busy. And then things sometimes calm down. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. While the Americans are definitely fighting and the British are definitely fighting, they're locked in this conflict and nobody can really get a hand up over the other one. So things are going to kind of stay the same. So some things that are going to change. You're going to talk about Valley Forge. That's going to change the identity of the soldiers and going to change how they fight. And that's why they're able to get into this conflict with Great Britain where no one is really winning or losing because the American soldiers get better. The second thing that happens is that the French join. And because the French are now fighting, Great Britain, instead of being hyper-focused on what's going on in the colonies, they have to back up. Because if France is involved, then Great Britain has some priorities. And one of those is they cannot lose control of the Caribbean. So the Caribbean is where they're making lots and lots of money. And the Caribbean and culturally, the slave culture there is tied very closely to the South. So because of that, Great Britain's attention is going to shift from New York and Pennsylvania down to the South. And this is what we call the Southern Campaign. So large battles start happening worldwide in the Caribbean and even as far away as India, as first France joins the fight. And then eventually Spain also jumps in to fight against the British. They're not really fighting for the Americans as much as they're fighting against the British. The British tactics are going to shift towards loyalists. So rather than trying to recruit a bunch of soldiers in England and ship them over here, they're going to try to convince loyalists in the South and in the middle colonies and in the north to fight against their neighbors, and it works. So a lot of the battles that happen in 1779 and 1780 are battles between two groups of Americans. We have patriots and loyalists fighting against each other. Another group that gets pulled in is Native Americans. And while they're mostly able to stay out of it, they get involved in these frontier battles as well. So you have small groups of people fighting in like the Ohio River Valley, in the Appalachian Mountains, in the deep south, and in the swamps of Florida. You have these groups of people who are fighting. And then we also get a Navy. So one of my favorite people, his name is John Paul Jones. He's a captain. He's the first naval captain. And he gets captured and he has this great phrase where he says, I have not even begun to fight. And then he wins. And it's amazing. So the war is going to shift away from kind of big battles in our big cities and into more frontier regions and along the coast. In 1771, the now United States of America finally puts together a government officially called the Articles of Confederation, and we'll talk more about them later. And then in the fall of 1781, we have Yorktown, which is the big kind of end of the war battle. But again, nothing officially happens for 2 years. So in your life, when you are trying to achieve something, or maybe even here in our country, if we're trying to achieve something, it's important to remember that the Revolutionary War took 8 years. That's a long time. And sometimes a lot of the work that gets done, like these years, isn't super obvious. It's a lot of small changes that add up to a big difference in the end. So if you're feeling discouraged, if you're feeling like you can't actually make things better, I would hope that this module will give you some hope and some encouragement that things can get better, but that sometimes it takes a long time. Good luck, and I'll see you on Thursday.